As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I was never chosen.
Never chosen?
No, not for nothing. I'll even go further with you, I never even ever had a pen pal.
No pen pal?
Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin were once the kings of comedy. From the late 1940s to the mid-1950s, the duo ruled Hollywood with their hilarious routines and undeniable chemistry. But as quickly as they rose to fame, everything fell apart. Their decade-long partnership came to a sudden and bitter end, and the two stars barely spoke for years. Fans always wondered what really happened behind the scenes, and more importantly, did they ever find peace? Before his own passing, Jerry Lewis finally opened up about his complicated relationship with Dean Martin. What caused one of comedy's greatest duos to split? And what did Jerry Lewis finally reveal after years of silence? Join us as we uncover the truth, but to understand the context. Let's take a look at their journey from the very start. The early life of Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was born on March 16, 1926, in Newark, New Jersey, into a family of entertainers. His parents were deeply connected to show business, which shaped his early years. His father, Daniel "Danny" Levitch, was a vaudeville performer who went by the stage name Danny Lewis. He was the son of Jewish immigrants from the Russian Empire. Jerry's mother, Rachel Ray Levitch, worked as a pianist for WOR Radio and also served as her husband's music director. While Jerry himself claimed in his 1982 autobiography that his birth name was Joseph, official records like his birth certificate and U.S. Census documents list his name as Jerome. Even the hospital where he was born remains a mystery, with conflicting reports suggesting either Clinton Private Hospital or Newark Beth Israel Hospital. Growing up, Jerry wasn't exactly a quiet kid. He had a mischievous streak, often pulling pranks around his neighborhood. For instance, he'd sneak into kitchens to steal fried chicken or pies, classic Jerry Lewis humor even as a teenager. But his troublemaking didn't stop there. He struggled in school, eventually getting expelled from Wequahic High School in the 9th grade. He gave it another shot at Irvington High School but dropped out again in 10th grade. Despite his early troubles, Jerry had a passion for performing. At 15, he created a comedy act called The Record Act, where he'd mime song lyrics while music played on a phonograph off stage. It was a simple idea, but it showcased his natural comedic timing and ability to make people laugh. However, his first big shot didn't quite go as planned. He booked a gig at a burlesque house in Buffalo, New York, but the audience wasn't impressed. After that, Jerry struggled to find work. To get by, he took on odd jobs. He worked as a soda jerk and a theater usher, including at the Paramount Theater and Loew's Capitol Theater in New York City. Interestingly, at the Paramount, he worked under Jean Plachette, Suzanne Plachette's father, before he found his footing in comedy. Jerry's luck turned when Max Coleman, a veteran burlesque comedian who had once worked with Jerry's father, encouraged him not to give up. Soon after, comedian Irving Kay spotted Jerry's mime act at Brown's Hotel in Loch Sheldrake, New York during the summer. This time, the audience loved it, and Kay believed in Jerry enough to become his manager. Thanks to Kay, Jerry started making appearances in the Borscht Belt, a popular resort circuit where comedians and entertainers performed for Jewish American audiences. When World War II broke out, Jerry was eager to serve his country. Unfortunately, he was rejected from military service due to a heart murmur, but that didn't stop him. He continued to chase his dream of becoming a star, sharpening his comedic style as he moved forward. Dean Martin, the cool crooner before Jerry. While Jerry Lewis was hustling to make people laugh, Dean Martin was on a completely different path. Born Dino Paul Crocetti in Steubenville, Ohio, Dean was the son of Italian immigrants. Before he became a household name, Dean worked a string of jobs. He was a steel mill worker, a gas station attendant, and even tried his hand as a boxer. But it was music that set Dean apart. With his smooth voice and effortless charm, he began performing in small clubs and lounges, singing hits that captured audiences' attention. He earned a reputation as a relaxed and suave crooner who could win over a room with just a smile. By the mid-1940s, Dean was starting to get noticed, but fame hadn't quite arrived yet. He had the voice, the looks, and the charisma, but he was still missing that spark to catapult him to stardom. Little did he know that fate would soon bring him together with a wild, energetic comedian named Jerry Lewis, and the world of entertainment would never be the same. The rise of Martin and Lewis, a perfect duo. In 1945, a 19-year-old Jerry Lewis crossed paths with 27-year-old singer Dean Martin at New York's Glass Hat Club. Jerry, the energetic goofball, and Dean, the smooth and charming crooner, didn't know their meeting would change comedy forever. The two began performing at the club and soon realized their chemistry was something special. A year later, on July 25, 1946, they debuted as Martin and Lewis at Atlantic City's 500 Club. The act was unlike anything people had ever seen. Dean played the calm, collected straight man, singing his routines with a relaxed charm. Jerry, on the other hand, was pure chaos, a whirlwind of slapstick humor and goofy antics. What made their comedy stand out was their ad-libbed improvisation. They weren't just reciting lines, they were playing off each other in ways that felt spontaneous and fresh. And audiences couldn't get enough. Their popularity exploded, and soon, Martin and Lewis were everywhere. They started a hit radio show, The Martin and Lewis Show, and made their first TV appearance on Toast of the Town, later known as The Ed Sullivan Show, on June 20, 1948. By this point, the world had fallen in love with them, from comedy clubs to Hollywood stars. The next big step for Martin and Lewis came in 1950, when they joined NBC's Colgate Comedy Hour. It was a live Sunday night show, and the duo became one of the regular rotating hosts. Lewis, always determined to push their material further, brought in Norman Lear and Ed Simmons to write fresh, sharp comedy routines. And it worked like magic. Their performances were full of energy and creativity, and the show cemented their place as America's favorite comedy team. Fans packed theaters to see them, including a wildly successful run at New York's Paramount Theater in 1951. That same year, Martin and Lewis made their film debut with My Friend Irma, 1949, and its sequel, My Friend Irma Goes West, 1950. But those were just the beginning. Over the next decade, the pair made 14 films that became huge box office hits. Titles like At War with the Army, Sailor Beware, The Stooge, Scared Stiff, and Living It Up turned them into movie superstars. The movies followed a simple but winning formula. Dean was the charming, woman-chasing singer, and Jerry was the lovable, trouble-making clown. Audiences knew what to expect and loved every minute of it. Fans couldn't get enough of their dynamic. DC Comics even launched The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, a comic series that ran from 1952 to 1957. But did you know that their fame wasn't just in theaters? The duo appeared on major shows like What's My Line, The Steve Allen Show, and The Today Show. Everywhere you looked, there they were. Martin and Lewis were unstoppable. But sadly, as their fame grew, cracks started to appear in the partnership. The beginning of the end. Dean Martin began to feel like he was being overshadowed. Lewis, with his high-energy comedy and creative ideas, had naturally started taking more control of their work. And Dean wasn't happy about it. He felt like the team was becoming the Jerry Lewis Show, and that his role as the straight man was fading. Tensions grew behind the scenes. Their once strong friendship started to unravel. Lewis still idolized Dean and couldn't understand why his partner was pulling away. The stress between them became harder to hide, and the pair eventually stopped speaking off stage. By 1956, it was clear that their partnership couldn't be saved. On July 24, 1956, exactly 10 years after their first show at the 500 Club, Martin and Lewis performed their final nightclub act at the Copacabana. Fans were devastated because the comedy duo that had defined a decade was no more. After the split, both men went their separate ways, refusing to comment on what had happened. Lewis later reflected on their bond, saying, "I don't think we would have ever been heard of without the other." But at the time, neither was ready to make amends. For the next 20 years, Martin and Lewis avoided each other completely. Their bitter breakup had turned into one of Hollywood's most infamous feuds. Then, On September 5, 1976, something unexpected happened that shocked everyone, including Jerry, the night that changed everything. Jerry Lewis was hosting his annual Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon, an event that had become a Labor Day tradition. That night, Frank Sinatra was performing live for the first time since 1953. It was already a big deal, but Frank had something else up his sleeve. After finishing his performance, Sinatra handed Jerry a donation and casually mentioned that a friend wanted to come out. The crowd watched, unaware of what was about to happen. Then, out of the shadows, Dean Martin stepped onto the stage. Jerry, completely caught off guard, looked stunned. He muttered, "You son of a butt," under his breath to Sinatra, unable to hide his shock. The audience erupted in applause. For the first time in 2 decades, Martin and Lewis were face to face. Dean, ever the cool charmer, broke the ice. "You know, it seems like we haven't seen each other for 20 years, he joked. Jerry, quickly catching up, replied, "Well, you know, there were all those rumors about our breaking up. And then when I started the show and you weren't here, I believed it." It was a moment of pure magic. For a few minutes, they were Martin and Lewis again, the duo the world had once loved. But while it was heartwarming for fans, the reunion didn't fix everything. It was awkward, brief, and more for the cameras than for the two men themselves. The emotional wounds ran deep. The funeral that brought them together. Even after their 1976 reunion, Jerry and Dean didn't truly reconnect. Their relationship stayed casual at best, and years passed without much contact. Then tragedy struck. In 1987, Dean Martin's eldest son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., died in a plane crash. It was a devastating loss that shook Dean to his core. When Jerry heard the news, he knew he couldn't stay away. He quietly attended the funeral, staying in the background out of respect. For Dean, seeing his former partner there meant a lot. It broke down the final walls between them. Though they never returned to the close friendship they once shared, they began talking again, on and off, in the years that followed. Jerry later admitted how much guilt he carried about their split. "I broke up the act," he told People in 2002. Reflecting on Dean's feelings, he added, "Dean hurt desperately, and I felt guilty of not seeing it sooner." Jerry finally understood that their breakup hadn't just affected him. It had deeply hurt Dean too. This moment of reconciliation, born out of tragedy, gave the two men some peace. Though their paths had diverged long ago, their bond could never be fully broken. But it was Frank Sinatra's role in reuniting Martin and Lewis that became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Frank Sinatra's surprise, a Hollywood moment. When Sinatra brought Dean on stage during Jerry's telethon, no one saw it coming, not even Jerry. Behind the scenes, Frank had carefully orchestrated the entire thing. He was known for pulling pranks, but this one was more meaningful than most. Even members of Sinatra's and Martin's families didn't know what was happening. Dean had been snuck into the building through back doors and hidden in Ed McMahon's dressing room until it was time for him to appear. Gary Lewis, Jerry's son, was working backstage that night and caught a glimpse of Dean before the big reveal. He was stunned but kept quiet, knowing his father hated surprises. "I thought, what the heck is going on?" Gary later recalled. When Dean finally walked on stage, it was a moment that stopped time. Fans watching at home were thrilled. Dina Martin, Dean's daughter, remembered her mother screaming when she saw it on TV. "I knew his walk," Dina said. "I got chills, my jaw dropped." For Jerry, the moment was overwhelming. His mind raced, unsure how to react. In a pitch-perfect callback to their very first meeting, he asked Dean, "So you working?" The crowd loved it, and for a few magical minutes it felt like nothing had changed. But the reunion didn't fully heal their relationship. It was more of a symbolic gesture than a true reconciliation. Frank had created a beautiful moment, but it would take years and another tragedy for Martin and Lewis to truly reconnect. Dean Martin's final years. By the early 1990s, Dean Martin's health was declining. A lifelong heavy smoker, he was diagnosed with lung cancer in September 1993 at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Doctors advised him to undergo surgery, telling him it could extend his life. But Dean, always known for his laid-back attitude, refused. Instead of battling through treatment, he chose to step away from the spotlight. Martin retired from public life in early 1995. He spent his final days quietly in his Beverly Hills home, surrounded by memories of a career that had brought him fame, fortune, and adoration. On Christmas Day of that year, Dean Martin passed away at the age of 78. The cause was acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema, a result of years of smoking. The world mourned the loss of the legendary crooner. In his honor, the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip were dimmed, which was a fitting tribute to a man who had made Vegas his kingdom. Martin was laid to rest at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. His crypt bears the epitaph, "Everybody loves somebody sometime." The line, taken from his most famous song, is a reminder of the joy he brought to millions. The final years, regrets and fond memories. As the years passed, Jerry Lewis began to speak more openly about his friendship with Dean. After Martin's death in 1995, Jerry reflected on their partnership with a mix of love and regret. "Why we broke up, I'll never know," he once said, hinting at the unresolved questions that still lingered in his mind. Jerry admitted that their breakup had been his fault, but he also realized how much Dean had been hurt by it. Despite Dean's public image as the relaxed, carefree crooner, Jerry believed that he had carried deep pain over their split. "Dean hurt desperately," Jerry said. Looking back, their partnership was magic. Comedian Steve Lawrence once said, "When Jerry and Dean started, it was like an explosion. When these two guys got together and opened at the Copacabana, you would not believe the pandemonium that existed in that club." Martin and Lewis changed comedy forever. They were the first comedy duo to bring style, sex appeal, and pure chaos to the stage. Before them, comedy acts were simple and predictable. Think Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. But Martin and Lewis were different. They had charm, they had chemistry, and they made history. While they both went on to have successful solo careers, Dean as a Rat Pack icon and Jerry as a comedy legend, there's no denying that together, they were unstoppable. Even with their complicated history, it was clear that Jerry had immense love and respect for his old partner. He often talked about the magic they shared during their 10 years as a team. "We were more than partners," Jerry said. "We were brothers." In their later years, small gestures brought moments of warmth. Jerry once surprised Dean on his 72nd birthday, showing up with a cake and sharing fond memories. Though they never became close friends again, these moments were enough to remind them both of what they had achieved together. The reunion at the 1976 telethon, while brief, became an iconic moment in television history. For fans, it was a reminder of the joy Martin and Lewis had brought to the world. And for Jerry, it was a chance to honor the bond he and Dean had shared, even if it had been fractured along the way. Jerry Lewis on Dean Martin. After Dean's death, Jerry Lewis spoke often about his former comedy partner. Their friendship had been complicated, filled with laughter, success, and an unforgettable breakup. But it was clear that Jerry never stopped loving Dean. In interviews, Lewis shared his deep respect and admiration for the man he once called his brother. "I think of Dean every day," Lewis said. He spoke fondly of their time together, describing it as pure magic. When asked if he had a favorite Martin and Lewis film, Jerry didn't hesitate. "All 16 of them," he said with a smile. "We had such great fun. We used to tease each other. Are we going to take the money for this?" Despite their years apart, Jerry never forgot what Dean meant to him. He later admitted that he carried guilt for their bitter split. "I broke up the act," Jerry confessed in 2002. "Dean hurt desperately, and I felt guilty of not seeing it sooner." It was a rare moment of vulnerability from Lewis, who had spent much of his career as the loud, zany comedian. For Jerry, Dean's passing was deeply personal. It was the end of an era, but the memories of their decade-long partnership and their eventual reconciliation stayed with him forever. Jerry Lewis, The Last Curtain Call. Jerry Lewis outlived his partner by more than 2 decades, but his final years were also filled with reflection and quieter moments. Always a workhorse, Jerry continued to act, perform, and even direct into his later years. In 2016, he starred in Max Rose, a dramatic role that showed a different side of the comedian. While promoting the film, Jerry spoke often about his career and his love for comedy. But whenever the topic of Dean Martin came up, it was clear those memories still meant the world to him. Lewis spoke of their time together with pride and even a touch of sadness, knowing they had created something timeless. On August 20th, 2017, Jerry Lewis died at his home in Las Vegas. He was 91. The cause of death was end-stage cardiac disease and peripheral artery disease. Just like Dean, Jerry left behind a legacy of laughter, entertainment, and unforgettable moments that would live on forever. Two men so different yet so perfect together had finally taken their final bows. But their partnership, with all its ups and downs, remains one of the most iconic stories in entertainment history. Their time as partners may have been short, but the legacy of Martin and Lewis will last forever. What do you think about their bond? Could their friendship have been saved if they had worked through their differences earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more such stories.